Welcome to Deep Thought. Why a new Martin hasn't emerged. You know what? In the black community, there's a lot of talk about the leadership. You know, people will say, how come that next great Martin or Malcolm or Garvey hasn't emerged, or Du Bois, something like that, right? And and of course, there are many people out there, whether it's a minister or someone in a conscious community, maybe a politician, definitely like peace, self-styled civil rights leaders who should have retired. Oops, did I go there? Anyway, right? And, people trying to be the leader, but it's a very simple reason, very, very simple reason why a new Martin hasn't emerged in the black community. A new, as the FBI called them during the COINTELPRO days, which might or might not have ended. Yeah. On this channel, I got to throw a little conspiracy stuff in there. Right? A black messiah. That one who could electrify the masses, right? There's a basic reason why it hasn't emerged. You have, because of what I always talk about, subcultures. You have so many groups in the black community. You have so many different strains. I mean, I wrote an article, and I referenced the article before on here, I believe. It's about, there were 4 black Americas, right? And the 4 I mentioned the upper class black America. That's like the old money, but also people who, because of their education, advanced degrees, they get in those circles, right? There's upper class black America. There's mainstream black America. Those the everyday folks. Those the mainstream. They go to church, they work, steady jobs, pay their bills, good citizens, right? Unfortunately, the most overlooked group, but and then you have underclass black America, which a lot of people think is representative of all of black America, which is some stupidity on their part, or my opinion, right? In my opinion, that's some stupidity, all right? But that's the image, and that's the image a lot of people are comfortable with, right? Oh, look at them, they doing so bad. It's also an image that some people exploit. Like some people in upper class, like if they're attorneys or, commentators, they'll say, hey, look how bad we're doing, right? And then, you got what I call alternative black America, right? Those are the communities, I mean, they might be like lumped under the big tent of Hotep brothers and sisters and stuff. Even though you have some people who are labeled in there who, don't want to have any connection with Kemet, otherwise known as Egypt, because you have Israelites, you have Muslims, you have Moors, you have some Pan-Africanists who don't necessarily, they agree with, they down with Africa, but they don't necessarily reach back to Kemet. It's a lot of groups in there. And indeed, in all the black Americas, there's several subcultures. Honestly, when you look at subcultures in the black community, I would estimate there's probably 1,000. The thing is, by nature, our subcultures flow together. And some people even could be a part of several subcultures. But the point is, there's no one black America. See, during the time of Malcolm or Martin, even more during the time of Garvey, most black people were in the same boat. Economically, that's why you could, even if there were economic differences, that's why you could have neighborhoods where you would have attorneys and doctors living next to like day laborers. That's why you would have high schools that had PhD level people teaching at it. Like my grandmother in the 30s went to this elite high school in D.C., Dunbar. And she had PhDs teaching her. it was more everybody was in the same place because of segregation and everything. But what's happened, with integration, we weren't stuck in the same neighborhoods. And what has happened is we were able to expand and follow. More blacks are able to be free to follow whatever path they want to follow. And then you also had the explosion of the gay community. That's a path. That's a subculture. I've already kind of mentioned a few subcultures in the alternative Black America, even within the upper class. Even the upper class, because you have two general groups of upper class. You got the old money. Those the blacks who can trace their lineage back to probably slave owners, or their families going back intact back to the 1800s. And those are the type that people erroneously call like Boule. The Boule is just one organization within that upper class. But then you also have people who, just because they strive, they could have came from an ordinary background, more mainstream, but because they got advanced degrees or joined certain fraternities, they get up there too. And then you still have groups. You got some groups that don't really associate with blacks at all. Even though they are black, just because of their position, all right? And then, when you get more into the mainstream, there's a lot of splits just according to religion. Even within the church, and the bottom line is everybody's not on the same thing. Because despite what people thinking, you have a lot of people say, well, our movement is limited. People in their own minds, yeah, you have some people say, well, the environment is limiting us. And, you have the people more on the civil rights thing say we need this, we're preventing. But quite frankly, there's a lot of people who just like, well, I'm living my life anyway. I don't really care about you, this stuff. I mean, seriously, you got some upper class folks. They like, they good with what they have. They actually have wealth. And I know some people say, well, overall we don't. Well, I say, no, when you get into the subcultures, yeah, some people have some stuff. Some people got property and stuff. Because remember, they lump us all together, but when you start looking at different segments, when you start looking at different ways of doing things, you can't apply it. Like, you get many... Like, one of my favorite examples, like, you get some guys who will say, well, all these black women are fat and all this, they all messing with Pookie and Ray Ray. Okay, that's one subculture. And it's not a universal one. Because you go into another, depending on where you live, and especially people who live in the district, the DMV area, the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia. There's a lot of black people with money. And their thing is just totally, you got whole communities of them. And they want something just totally different. They want something totally different. So it's like they're not going to have the same perception or anything. So when you look at that, and if people are free to live something, you can't have one person come through and say, oh, we speak for y'all. Heck, even when Martin and Malcolm was there, Malcolm wasn't as popular as people try to say during that time. He's probably more popular in death than he was when he was actually living. All right? He's probably actually more popular in death. He had some people, but, he probably couldn't have called a march on Washington. King was the big person, but then there were still people, black people, who were like, he needs to take a seat. So, and that's even more pronounced today. So, sometimes when people look at terms of that great leader and something, it's probably not going to happen. It's probably not going to happen. Now, it don't mean woe is me. I know some people say, well, woe is me, but understand, a lot of people have freedom now. And they don't feel oppressed. See, that's one thing. Many in the black community do not feel oppressed. They just feel like, hey, I just had to work hard, get mine. Heck, you got some in the criminal subcultures who just like, oh, we don't care. We're going to get ours anyway. I mean... That's why. And you know what? It is what it is. It really is what it is. Sometimes I think, you get a lot of people who purport they speaking for the community. And really, no. They deluded. They speaking for themselves and hoping somebody like latches on. But you know, and it is what it is. We just have a time where people just feel, hey, we can just do our thing. So anyway, something to think about. I'll get back with y'all later. Peace and many blessings.